Hello, everyone. We are going to start in a minute, and for the people who have been messaging me, yes, you are in the meeting, and we're just waiting patiently for the top of the hour, which is now. So I'm just going to bring in Anand Schiff, the co-founder of CSPNI, the Canadian Society for Protection of Nature in Israel, to formally kick us off.
Okay, are we almost ready here?
I believe we are ready.
Okay, very good. Hello and welcome to the first Canadian Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel Zoom get-together. We trust you are all well, and we hope that all those close to you are safe, and let us continue to take all precautions in order to get back to business as usual and maybe even do more than we were before. Special thanks go today to Avi and Lawrence for setting up. Hello, we have a guest. I see an Israeli flag there. Okay. Hello, Galit, I'm assuming. Special thanks go to Avi and Lawrence for setting this technical matters up. I even have my personal assistant, my 11-year-old techie grandson helping me. And I hope you can make out the backdrop. We brought that up from the office just to give some CSPNI atmosphere. We have an outstanding list of guest speakers this evening. Galit Baram, the Consul General in Toronto for the State of Israel. Dianne Saxe, internationally recognized expert on environmental affairs. Hann, CEO of the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel in Tel Aviv. And Jay Shofet, Director of Partnership and Development, also in Tel Aviv. We'll be able to answer a few of your questions this evening. In addition, we'll reply to any additional questions we may not be able to answer. And please send in any comments that you may have, suggestions, and other thoughts. And now for the briefest history ever of the Canadian Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. About 20 years ago, my late wife, Helene, and I were in Israel, where she was assisting the development of a health agency. As we were avid hikers back then, we discovered SPNI and went on 2 multi-day hikes. We also became aware of the wide scope and importance of the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. This amazing organization should have a presence in Canada, we said. And with some work and assistance from SPNI, the Canadian Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel was granted official status by Canada Revenue Agency. And we are able to issue authorized tax receipts for all donations. Since that time in 2012, we have raised several $100,000. However, we must keep in mind that our base of donors is still quite small. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we look forward to your ongoing interest and support. Your support in carrying on the critical work undertaken by the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. I'm now honored to introduce Galit Baram, Consul General for the State of Israel. It is my pleasure to introduce Galit, who has been Consul General in Toronto since 2016. Galit joined the Israeli Foreign Service in 1994. Her postings included Moscow, Cairo, and Washington, D.C. She also served as the director of the Department of Palestinian Affairs and is in Toronto now. She's married to her fellow diplomat and has 2 children. Galit, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. you know, this tool, this Zoom app it proves to be so useful, and now we adapt most of our activity here, our public diplomacy activity, to Zoom because of the situation, the coronavirus pandemic. The original plan, actually, when it comes to the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, the original plan was to organize an event, invite people over to the consulate, have a little reception, a get-together, and hear about the activity of the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. The circumstances, of course, changed dramatically. This is a situation we have to cope with, but I'm sure we'll find another opportunity in the future. We're very fortunate in Toronto, at the consulate in Toronto, I have to tell you, in comparison to other diplomatic missions in North America, because people usually come to Toronto. If they visit Canada, they come to Toronto, and we get quite a few Israeli guests here, representatives of Israeli organizations, municipalities, universities, hospitals from all over Israel, and they provide a full picture of Israeli society with its diversity and color and energy and creative spirit. You know only too well, as much as I do, that sometimes from the media, the picture of Israel that is created is very bleak, and we need these visitors to come and provide a different facet of Israeli society, a different aspect of our little country. Israelis all have their own connection to SPNI. We grow up in a small country, and we're all familiar with the activity because we participate on field trips from elementary school and on. There are educational activities that are attended by students in Israel in middle school and high school. There were different campaigns for the protection of wildlife and wildflowers, especially wildflowers, in the history of Israel that we all remember very well from our childhood. So it's an integral part of the connection between an Israeli citizen, any Israeli citizen, and their homeland. It is particularly important in a small country such as Israel, which is pretty crowded, with a population of 9.3 million, according to recent surveys, recent polls. And open spaces are diminishing because of the development of new neighborhoods and infrastructure and IDF training areas that are very important. It's an integral part of our way of life, military bases and training areas that are dedicated to the IDF. And it comes on the expense of nature. And this is why it's so important for all of us to unite and to protect nature in Israel. There is another personal connection that I would like to mention here. It was mentioned in the introduction that I'm married to a fellow diplomat. It's not a secret. He works with me. This is my deputy, Nissan Amdul. And before he joined the Foreign Service, he was actually an SPNI guide for 2 years. And he worked with elementary school, middle school, and high school students in what he remembers as very formative years in his life. And he enjoyed it tremendously. And this is how he teaches our own children. We have 2 children who are in high school, and the connection of nature, the influence of nature is very important in the connection between the people of Israel, and especially young people of Israel, and their own homeland. And there is a lot of beauty in this little country. After the coronavirus pandemic is over and tourism is restored, hopefully soon, I hope that people who visit Israel will not only go to tourist attractions, to visit holy sites, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, which are the basics, but will also travel around the country and watch migrating birds and walk the Israel Trail and see what this little country has to offer when it comes to nature. So congratulations on this initiative. I hope that there will be more people to follow and more people who will learn about the activity of this very important organization in Israeli society. Now, I would like to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Dianne Saxe. She's already waiting here online, I hope. Dr. Dianne Saxe is one of Canada's most respected environmental lawyers and was the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario from 2015 to 2019. She was appointed unanimously by all MPPs to report to the legislature on Ontario's environmental, energy, and climate performance, and to be the guardian of the Environmental Bill of Rights. Now heading Saxe Facts Law Professional Corporation, she provides legal and strategic inspiration and direction on climate, energy, and environment. Dr. Saxe, the floor is yours.
Hello, how are you? I hope you guys can see my screen. Can somebody tell me whether you can see it or not?
Yes, they can.
Excellent, thank you very much. All right, so I am going to try to run through part of a presentation I give about how climate changes everything, and then we're going to hear from the next speaker about what's actually happening in Israel, because that's not my area of expertise. Basically, I want to talk a little bit about why I believe climate change is everything, and it's especially an important issue for Jews, and a few words about what we can do about it. Now, I hope all of you know already basically how people cause the climate crisis, but in many of my talks, not everybody does. So this is the basics. We create the climate crisis because burning fossil fuels puts greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and as a result, what used to happen with most of the sun's heat is it would bounce off the Earth's surface and go back out to outer space. The greenhouse gases, again, mostly from burning fossil fuels, they close the windows where the heat used to escape. And so what happens is that a lot of heat that used to escape now bounces back from the atmosphere and is trapped in the atmosphere and in the oceans. And gradually, as time goes on, we get more and more heat building up, and we start to experience the effects. This is the simplest way to think about it is giving the world a fever. We have the highest recorded, GHGs is the shorthand normally used for greenhouse gases. So we have the highest recorded rates of greenhouse gas emissions in human history, not precisely this moment because of COVID, but certainly just before. We have the highest levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere ever recorded, and that's true right now. We're probably going to break even more records this month. Usually we do in May, even though we're not emitting quite as much right now, because what's in the atmosphere is essentially a record of what we've done up until now, especially in the last generation. We've got the highest recorded temperatures, and what you see on this drawing, that dark red, that's record warmest, and that's from last June, record warm temperatures in many places around the world. And we're also breaking all kinds of records we don't want to break for ocean acidity and ice melting and many other things. Now, where is all that heat going? Most of it is not in the atmosphere where people tend to notice it. What you can see in the chart on the left is that most of the heat that's built up because of human use of fossil fuels
Sorry, Dianne.
Yes?
Sorry, no one can actually see your presentation. You need to share your screen.
Oh, well, that's what I asked right at the beginning, is whether you...
Oh, sorry.
All right.
If you press your little share screen at the bottom.
Yeah.
Then,
I did
awesome.
that. I did that right at the beginning, and it worked perfectly last time.
Okay.
That's a challenge. What should I do about that?
Try to stop sharing your screen and then share your screen.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will try again. Do you see it now?
Yes.
All right. Well, anyway, I'm sorry, everybody. The ones I showed before this is the drawing about how the heat gets trapped, which hopefully you know. And this one shows the records. All right. Well, I will. And are you seeing just the slide, or are you also seeing the backup slides on the corner?
We're seeing both, but it's fine.
Okay.
Unless you go F5, I think it is.
All right. Well, we'll do it this way.
Our audience, I believe, are happy, so we can continue.
All right. I'm sorry for the technical glitches. Anyway, what you should now see, I hope, is a drawing showing how heat is built up in the world. And it's mostly occurred during my lifetime and Alan's. And you can see, where is all that heat? Well, for those of you with sharp eyes, you can see there's a very small red line at the bottom of the chart. Hopefully somebody sees that, maybe. Narit, can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, and anyway, that's all the heat that it is now in the atmosphere, where we notice it when we step outside. There's about 1%. There's 3% roughly in the soil and vegetation. There's about 3% roughly that's made the ice warmer, and all the rest of it is in the oceans. Three big impacts when you heat up the oceans. The first is that warmer water, just like warmer air, takes up more space, and that raises sea levels. The second thing is that warmer water holds less oxygen, which is a huge issue for anything in the oceans that needs to breathe. And the third thing is that storms are heat engines. So the warmer the oceans are, the faster and more ferocious are the storms, which we have, of course, seen. And we are scheduled, apparently, to have yet another record-breaking hurricane year in the Atlantic this year for the 5th year consecutively, which we will have, well, we still have presumably a COVID crisis as well. Cities are hotter. Toronto, for example, in the last century and a half, the period of time when the world as a whole has warmed a little over 1 degree centigrade, Toronto has warmed more than 3 degrees centigrade. Part of that is from climate, part of that is from the urban heat island effect, but all of it affects people, and increasingly means we have nights when it's too hot to sleep without air conditioning, which is particularly hard on the most vulnerable. We can see that winters have changed already. This is the last four decades in Ontario, and you can see that winters are much wetter now than they used to be. The bluer areas are getting much more winter precipitation, and they're getting much more that used to always come as snow, as rain that causes flooding. It kills wildlife. It has many, many effects. Now, many people say to me, well, what does this have to do with us? There's only 37 million of us. There's lots of other people in other countries. Surely this is about them and not about us. And that's not true. Although we are a very small country from a per capita point of view, we are a very big country from a polluter point of view. Of the nearly 200 countries in the world, Canada is one of the top 10, not just per capita. We're one of the biggest per capita emitters, but as a total country, we are among the top 10 climate polluters, both cumulatively and what we're doing today. And what the oil and gas industry proposes to do, which is to continuously increase our emissions by dramatically increasing our exports and production and exports on the oil sands, would make this even larger. So what does this all mean for us? Now, what I've noticed in the 45 years over my career is that when people get bad news, whether it's pandemics or job losses or health issues, many people just want to hang on and wait for normal to come back. And even now I hear people saying on the radio, gee, the weather's really weird. This is normal weather for this month is this and this. And I need you to know that normal is gone. What people usually mean by normal, what our laws mean by normal, what our culverts are designed for, our infrastructure is designed for, our insurance is designed for, is roughly the average of the 20th century. And that's the zero line on this chart. And as you can see, we don't live there anymore. And this is only what's happened already. And we know it's going to get much worse because it takes about a generation between the time that we burn fossil fuels, drive our cars around, take airplane flights, whatever the case may be, and the time that we really start to experience the effects. So what you're seeing on this chart is mostly the effects of emissions when my children were young. and now they're parents of their own. Now, I'm from an evidence-based profession. I don't know how many of you are from evidence-based professions. There's a lot of reasons to make decisions based on evidence, but there's one really big drawback to making decisions based on evidence, and that's that evidence can only come from what's happened already. And we're in territory that's never happened before. The last time carbon dioxide levels were this high in the atmosphere, there were no people. So we're going into completely uncharted territory, and we're going there faster and faster and faster every year. And that's averages I'm telling you about. And if you think of the old joke, if your head's in the oven and you have 3rd-degree burns and your feet are in the freezer and you have frostbite, on average, you're fine. But in fact, you need to go to the hospital. And it's the same here. It's the extremes that do most of the damage. And we've already got 4 times as many climate extremes as we did long ago in the 1960s, 70s, and 1980s, as calculated by those wild and crazy people, the actuaries. So it's not a question anymore of if, it's a question of when, for all the things that climate makes more likely: fire, flood, drought, wind, heat. And we can look and see, well, what's ahead? What's ahead during the lifetime of today's children? Well, we're starting to get a pretty good idea. Now, most of the international studies about climate talk about what's going to happen in 2100. I spent a lot of time with politicians as environmental commissioner, and I can tell you I never met anybody who really cared that much about 2100, because none of them expect to be in power in 2100. They won't be in power in 2050. But today's children can expect to live till the end of the century. So we're talking about what's going to happen to them. And we're starting to know, as the evidence gets clearer and clearer from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and if anybody says to you, you don't know who to believe, these are the people to believe. One of the largest, probably the largest scientific collaboration in human history, thousands of scientists working for decades. We've got a pretty good sense of what's coming. And they put out 3 really damning special reports in the last year and a half that have frightened me and anybody else who's paying attention. The first thing is, how quickly will things get bad? The International Treaty on Climate, which was signed in 1992 based on science done in the 1980s, said we're going to all agree, and all the countries of the world agreed, we're going to keep the temperature increase below 2 degrees. Well, the IPCC has now shown us that a world where we allow warming of 2 degrees is going to have large, widespread, and robust differences. It's going to be much less safe and secure. There's going to be human and natural systems that are going to lose their ability to adapt. If we could stay at 1.5 degrees, which was one of the targets at the Paris Agreement in 2015, well, we would have a world that was much more stable, much more safe, with much less heavy precipitation, extreme heat, drought, and sea level rise, and probably would be able to cope. But we're not on track to stay below 1.5. The second major report was about land and food. This report told us that the climate crisis is already adversely affecting food quality, food security. We have high risks, 1.5 degrees, very high risk if we go to 2 degrees. And if we keep delaying our action, we can expect more expensive food, less stable food, rapid declines of agricultural productivity, especially in hot countries, more wildfire, more conflict, and more people on the move. And the third report came out last summer, last fall, looking at everything that's frozen, and basically everything frozen is melting faster and faster and faster and faster. So we can expect massive damage to the homes of hundreds of millions of people in the next few decades, soaring flood damage, dire water shortages. And you think about how much political disruption there has been from 1 million people in Syria on the move after their 1 in 900 year drought. Well, imagine when there's hundreds of millions of people on the move. We know there's 1 million species at risk in the natural systems on which our lives depend. The World Health Organization has identified climate change as one of the biggest global health threats of this century. And we know that when you have large-scale uneven impacts, destabilizing existing institutions, we really could see much more social conflict and maybe war. That's the simplest way to say it. So people ask me, is it too late? Well, I have to say, too late for what? We've known the basic science of the climate crisis pretty well since the 1980s. We all agreed, the whole countries of the whole world agreed in 1992 that we would dramatically reduce our use of fossil fuels so that we would keep the climate in a safe zone, and we haven't done it. But there's still a little time to avoid the worst. We are in an absolutely critical decade, and our choices right now really, really matter. So that's true for everybody. I think it's particularly an issue that should be of concern for Jews, and here's 3 reasons. I mean, there's others, but here's number 1. Thinking about Jewish history, times of conflict and widespread loss and disruption have not generally been good for Jews. Number 2, Jews, at least in North America, tend to have higher incomes than average, and higher incomes normally translate into higher impact, higher fossil fuel use. And for those of us who care about the land of Israel, extreme heat, dire water shortages, and sea level rise are just a 1, 2, 3 really, really hard punch for the land of Israel, and people in Israel, many people understand this. So, and then of course we have the rule of TIKUN OLAM. It is our obligation, if we have power and privilege, to do something to look after the world, because there's no one to repair it after us. And particularly, our children will have a right to look at us, because so much of the damage has occurred just in the last 30 years. Since we had the science and known what the consequences would be, we, especially those of us in the rich countries, have doubled the level of climate pollution in the atmosphere. So fully 1/2 of the climate damage is attributable to what we have done in the last, we and other rich people like us around the world have done in the last 30 years. For those of you who are interested in a Jewish exploration on climate change, I strongly recommend it, called Living Underwater. It's a zine. You can find it online. If you can't find it, I'll make sure Avi has a link to it. And it does include an article of mine looking at the parallel between the 10 plagues that we just read at Passover and what's happening to us today. And who are the pharaohs today? So what can we do? Well, if we want a 2-degree world, which is what the international treaty calls for, we know it's a world that will be much less stable and safe than today, but it would be survivable for most people. If we want that, then we've got to cut our climate pollution at least 1/4, more than 1/4, this decade. And that's within the working lifetime of most boilers and cars and all the other infrastructure we've already built. And we have to be to 0 in the next 50 years, which sounds like a long way off, but it's actually really hard. If we if we were to cut our climate pollution 5% every single year, it doesn't get us there. If we want a 1.5-degree world, which is a world that's less stable and safe than today, more expensive food, less nutritious, but still means that most human and natural systems will be able to adapt, well, we've got to cut our climate pollution here, right here, in half this decade. And probably we should be doing more, but the minimum is to cut it in half this decade. And we have to be to 0 in the next 30 years, which requires a lot of technology we haven't invented yet. Getting to half this decade, it's technically possible. It's politically and economically challenging, but it's technically possible. It's really challenging, and we're going to need the kind of innovations that come out of Israel and other places. So what can we do? Well, I ask everyone at every level, individuals, families, communities, institutions, countries, we have to reduce our carbon footprint, and we should be doing it. We should be cutting it in half this decade. Means we've got to be cutting it about 7.5% every single year. The good news for Canadians is because we are some of the most wasteful people in the entire world, we also drive the most carbon polluting vehicles in the entire world, in Canada. We have lots of room to reduce our climate pollution and improve our lives. We need to get ready to adapt to the changes that are coming, because many changes are coming. And we have to speak up for collective action, because climate can't be resolved only by changing personal habits. It's a collective problem, and we need collective action. Individual action does matter a lot. If you want details, because I was the environmental commissioner in Ontario, my reports were all about climate pollution and facts in Ontario. If you're interested in what exactly are the major contributors to climate pollution by individuals in Ontario, this report, it's on my website, saxefacts.com. Government still has it posted if you hunt hard enough. You'll get the details there. But one thing to pay attention to, well, these are big ones. Transport, housing, investment, the way we invest our money, tremendously important. Nutrition, what we eat, and generally what we consume. But collective action matters much more than individual action. And that's the job of government. So we need to speak up for government action. How do we speak up? So I'd like you to memorize these 11 words that Ed Maybach has developed. This is the best description I've ever seen of how to reach hearts and minds. Simple, clear messages, repeated often by a variety of trusted voices. I can't hear you, but please repeat in the back. Simple, clear messages, repeated often by a variety of trusted voices. And each of you will be a trusted voice in some circles and for some people. We know that the people who are most trusted are not necessarily people like me. It's not lawyers. It's certainly not politicians. The most trusted profession in the entire world, according to a survey done by Veracity, is nurses. And close after them, doctors and vets and other people that we go to and that we trust. So everyone has an opportunity to speak up, and everyone's voice counts. 3 key areas to speak up on: pricing climate pollution, stopping urban sprawl, which is the largest driver of climate pollution in Ontario, and protecting nature. And so we're going to hear one of the reasons I was glad to give my time tonight for CSPNI is the great work that you folks do to protect nature in Israel, where it's going to be exceptionally hard to protect and even more urgently needed than in other places. So I would like to have some hope. I hope that you feel the same way. And the only formula I know for hope is this one. We have to start by looking at the facts, even though they're really quite grim. And then we have to take action collectively. We need to be able to work with other people to take action. And only if we do that can we realistically have hope. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And I hope that you will. So that's me. And I think I was supposed to introduce the next speaker, and I have misplaced her bio. Avi, can you rescue me?
Avi can't, but I will. I can introduce the next speaker on your behalf. Thank you very much, Dianne. That was a really fascinating and somewhat inspiring, though worrying presentation.
Sorry, Iris. I know I was supposed to do it. I put it somewhere.
It's okay.
It's all right. Iris is the CEO of the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, the organization that I am proud to work for. She's been CEO now for 3 years and led us through definitely a transition in our work and starting to branch out into climate change. And I'm just going to hand over to Iris.
Thank you. Okay, I'll try to share my screen. Just a moment. Let's see if it works. No. Okay, just a moment. Oh, it's always complicated. One more try.
There you go.
No, this is my email.
I can't.
What?
Keep pressing the tab, Alt tab.
I can't see my desktop.
No, I can.
You can?
I can see. No, I can see your email.
Ah, that's not good enough.
Just try again, I would say.
New share.
Yeah.
Advanced files, maybe files. No.
Have you got that?
No, I need it. Just a moment. Once again. Screen whiteboard. Can't find it.
If it helps, I have the presentation from yesterday, so you can tell me where you want to start.
No, I changed it.
There you go.
Let's see. Just a moment. No, doesn't work. It was on my desktop. Why it disappeared?
Have you opened the presentation, Iris?
What?
Have you actually opened the presentation on your computer?
Yes, but from yesterday?
No, or just the presentation you want to give tonight for everyone.
How did you open it? I can't see it.
No, I said, can you open it? Have you opened it on your computer? Have you opened the file?
Yes, it's open on my computer, but I can't see my desktop. That's the problem.
Okay, stop sharing for a second and sort it out.
I did it twice. Okay. Advanced. No. Files. Oh, Google Drive. Just a moment. So much visual, so I don't want to.
Iris, why don't you email it to?
It's too big. It's too heavy to be emailed.
Okay.
Iris, you know what you can do? Let me try and take control of your screen.
Just a moment. I can see it now. Just a moment. Just to stay calm. Here it is. Okay. Can you see it now?
No. Your screen has changed. You have done something. I think just stop sharing and start sharing again, and we should be able to see it.
Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. This takes too much time. Okay. Now you can see it. In a minute, I can see it. It's kind of progress. Just a moment.
There we go.
Woo! Can you see it?
Yes, and we can see.
Yes. Okay. You should always stay optimistic and things will work. Okay. So thanks, Dianne, for the excellent overview. I'll try to concentrate on the connection between nature conservation in Israel and the connection relationship to the climate change crisis in Israel. Of course, in the shadow of the Corona crisis, which makes things much more complicated. A few words about the SPNI. Ellen mentioned a few words in the beginning, and Galit said a few words. But as you can see here, we are NGO, the largest, of course, the most important. I'm not objective, of course, NGO in Israel. One of the oldest in the whole world. SPNI was founded in 1953. And since then, we are working in a few arenas, few ways to protect nature in Israel. We'll see in a few minutes that we have a special and very unique nature in Israel. And we work in three main ways: environmental activism in a few arenas, in planning and building committees. This is my professional background, in courts, in the government, the central government, municipalities, everywhere that we can be activists, we are there. Education is a very important way of acting in Israel, and of course, ecotourism. We have 33,000 household members in the SPNI. They are our public support, gives us public support, and of course, we work in a very professional ways, and our agenda, all the decisions we make, everything we choose to do based on professional decisions. A few photos from Israel, beautiful nature, short video of a jungle cat was taken in this last days of the coronavirus crisis. Okay, he left us, so we'll go on. A few words about Israeli unique nature. Here we can see the biodiversity hotspots all over the world, colored in the red areas that you can see here all around the globe. And you can see that only 1.4 of the terrestrial global area are, were recognized as hotspots. And we can see Israel here, part of these areas. And the reason to our very unique biodiversity in Israel is because we are kind of bridge or a meeting point between a few continents. And you can see here the colors, it's in Hebrew, but I'll translate it. The green areas are Mediterranean areas, Irano-Turanic in part of the areas of Israel, the desert in the south of Israel, Sudanic habitats in part along the rift and the Jordan Valley River and Dead Sea. We have, like our population that comes from all over the world to Israel, we have animals, and we have plants that meet here in Israel and create a very, very unique biodiversity in international scale. We are very lucky to have this biodiversity in Israel, and this is one more reason that I can add to what you mentioned before, Dianne, one more reason why we should be more concerned about climate change, because it affects and threatens the very unique biodiversity that we have here in Israel. We're a very small country, but we are blessed in a very unique nature. We can see here photos from all over the country. Here we can join the view, we can join the landscape, but behind this we have the habitats, very unique, very diverse habitats, and a very unique biodiversity. I suppose everybody knows that we are a bottleneck for birds migration, and 500 million of birds cross the country twice a year from Europe to Africa. We can see it here in the illustration down here. One more reason why we are affected by climate change more than the space we have in the world. Okay, the corona crisis affects us, like the whole world, in a very severe way. We are, as an NGO based, most of our budget comes from self-generated income. Every day it's a very, it's kind of blessing, and it's a kind of strength that we have, because we can be independent, we can choose our battles, we can choose our agenda. But now, because of the corona crisis and all the restrictions, all of our activities were stopped in one day. All the activities that we can charge money for, all the field schools, we can see here Engedi Field School, the first one in Israel and in the world, is empty. We had to stop all our activities here. We had nobody to guide. All the groups were not able to go outside. So we're in a kind of shutdown because of the corona crisis. And we didn't stop to work. We can't stop working. We try to adjust our activities and to do many things online, like we're doing now. Instead of meeting in Toronto, we meet here by Zoom. We worked with the public by using our Facebook, using this Zoom webinars to show and to share and to study with our members and with all the Israeli population, showing them the Israeli beautiful nature through the computer screens. But this was the only thing that we could do. These days, we were informed that in the coming days we will be able to go out to nature again, so we will be able to go back to work. We couldn't stop working through the Corona crisis time because we can't stop being dog watchers here in Israel as NGO, and all the plans, the harming plans, kept going even in these difficult times. Here we can see it's a gas platform. But in the Corona crisis time, there was a new plan for a FLNG station, floating liquefied natural gas that was planned to be built somewhere in the deep seas of Israel. The Ministry of Energy published that the plan is now on the table and gave a very short time for the public to give comments. Of course, we interfered, and because of that, we have now for the public much more time to give comments on this very problematic plan. Here in this beautiful place, beautiful landscape in the middle of the Galilee, the army had a plan to pave a new road, and we had to stop it. We succeeded to stop it with the public in the middle of the Corona crisis time. So we can't stop working, and this is what we were doing through the Corona crisis time. But now we are looking ahead, and our goal is to look to the future and to compete with the ongoing crisis, the climate change crisis. Now, we had a very excellent overview that Dianne gave, so I'm not gonna focus on it. I'll just say that in Israel, the climate change crisis is in a very low place in the agenda. And it's very difficult to, we're trying, as you say, Dianne, to speak about it, to raise awareness about it, to speak, as you said, in a very simple and a very clear messages, but it's very difficult. These are the, we try, as FPNI, we try to focus, we focus on in the climate change agenda, which is very wide. We are trying to focus on the connection, the relationship between climate change and biodiversity, nature protection here in Israel. And here in this slide, I'm not going to read it, you can read it by yourself. We tried to phrase the main messages in a simple and clear language. And this is the main thing that we try to convince with them, to try to speak with the public. You can see them, we try to focus on the connection between nature and climate change. I'm going to skip it because then you covered all this issue very deeply. And a few words about Israel. Israel is very small. We have all kinds of threats that we have to deal with every day. But we can see that we must cope with the climate change crisis because we know now that Israel warmed since 1950 till today. The average temperature in Israel raised in 1.4 degrees, which is more than the average heat in the whole world. So this is one reason that we have to be more worried about this issue. And here we can see a few more facts or information about the scenario that we're going to have to deal with. We have to remember that we are, you said before, Dianne, that the Mediterranean area is going to be baked. Yes, we're going to be baked here. And it has many aspects, water shortage, geopolitical unstableness, and we even now have a very severe water shortage. It's going to be much worse in the future. So we have to be concerned about it very, very deeply, and we are trying to raise awareness to this problem. You mentioned before the IPCC. I want to mention its sister, IPBES, which it's the International Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. This panel, which is very similar to the IPCC, but focus on the state of nature in the whole world, published reports, works very similar to the IPCC. And we can see here the main findings of the last report that was published a year ago, in May last year. And we can see here very problematic and very severe findings, which if we take the bottom line, we can understand that the state of nature in the whole world, and in Israel as well, our very unique biodiversity that we saw before, are threatened, and the state of nature, of biodiversity in the whole world, if we're going to continue in business as usual, we're going to lose, the nature is in danger, and it's not nature in danger, we are in danger, we as humanity. Because as human beings, we are dependent on nature for food, for water supply, for air quality, for medicines. And if nature is gonna, we're gonna keep going in this way, in the business as usual scenario, we as human beings will be in danger in this planet, on the Earth. So these are the findings, and here we can see the focus on the relationship between climate change and biodiversity, because climate change affects biodiversity and of course affects us as human beings. And here we can see a very important and clear, it's a little bit, seems complicated, but we'll look on it for 1 minute. It shows, it was prepared by the WWF, and shows the interaction between these 3 poles, climate change, nature, and people. Now you can see all the, you can see the explanation here near the arrows in all 3 colors, but I want to say one thing about this illustration. This circle can go in two ways. One way is a negative one, which this is the way we are going right now. We as a humanity, we are, as people, harm the climate. Dianne mentioned it before, spoke about it before, and in the same time we harm nature. We saw the findings before of the IPBES. So we harm nature in 2 ways: directly, as we can see here, and indirectly through affecting the climate. But we can and we should reverse the direction of this relationship, and we can and should use nature as our partner, as our ally, fighting climate change. And if we will protect nature, nature will protect us directly, and nature will protect us, provide us everything we need to survive here on this planet, and nature can protect us to cope with climate change. And nature can do it in two ways. It can do it by mitigation and do it by adaptation. And I'll show it now shortly. From 100% of CO2 that is emitted to the atmosphere, only 44% stays in the atmosphere, goes to the atmosphere, reach to the atmosphere, and more than half, 56%, is absorbed by nature. This is the role that nature plays in the mitigation part. 31% is absorbed by terrestrial habitats, and 26% by oceans and seas all over the globe. Now, we know that tropical forests are well known as absorbing CO2, but they are not alone. Also, grasslands, which we have much of them in Israel, and savannas in Africa and all over the world, absorb CO2. And the main message from this illustration is that we have to protect nature, all the diverse and all the variety of habitats to help us absorb CO2 and prevent CO2 to get into the atmosphere. Now, in the adaptation side, there are nature-based solutions to cope, to adapt to the changes in the climate, that we will deal in the coming years. Now, even if we will all do everything by the Paris Agreement, we know that we will have to deal with global warming. And nature can help us cope with global warming in every issue, every topic that we can see here. We in the SPNI have detailed plan that shows nature-based solution to every topic here in the Israeli arena, of course. And I want to show just one example from one of the issues that we are working on these days, the streams issue. And we can see here two photos. Here we can see photos that shows the traditional way, the easiest way to cope with drainage policy, how to take water from point A to point B in the fast and easiest way. And what we see for many years in Israel is that we build a kind of a tunnel, concrete tunnel, or sometimes it's a pipe that takes the water as fast as it's able to from point A to point B. Now this is a lose-lose-lose situation. What we lose here? We lose biodiversity and habitats all over the stream because it's all artificial. We lose fertile soil. You can see what happens here in this side of the photo. We lose water because the waters go to the sea and they are not absorbed into the soil. So we lose water. It doesn't work. It was supposed to prevent the fields in the sides, shoulders of the stream to be flooded and to be covered by water, by the rain, but it doesn't work because nature is stronger than us. And we lose in one way because it's ugly and we can't enjoy walking here in the side of the stream. But we can deal this in the same, to solve the same problem in another way, in a nature-based solution. And here we can see win-win-win situation. We protect all the habitats along the stream. We don't lose soil, fertile soil. We let the water absorb into the ground. And we can enjoy a very nice place here in Israel. So if we sum up what we see, we've seen it now that nature is the foundation of our resilience, health, stability, and human well-being. It's a short and clear message. It's simple, but it's a little bit difficult to explain how it's important here in Israel. If we will protect nature, nature will protect us back. and of course, dealing with climate change, and of course the corona crisis, which is a very important landmark. Our challenge is to take the importance of nature that I think all over the world, and even here in Israel, many people revealed or saw the nature in new eyes, or saw how nature realized how nature is important for us, how it's important to have nature inside the cities, near our houses, how it's important for us. And our challenge now is to take this crisis and to use it as an opportunity. It's not so easy because it can go, we are standing in a kind of junction, and we can go reverse, and the nature can be in a very low place in the agenda. But our challenge is to take it and to take this crisis and to explain this very clear and clear messages, and to explain and make people realize, decision makers and the whole public realize that nature is our partner. Nature is not luxury. Nature is our ally against climate change, against corona crisis, against everything and with everything to survive on this planet. And we need you with us during this time that I hope will be, this crisis will be behind us, and we will be able to focus on the ongoing crisis, the ecological crisis, and the climate change crisis. So this is for now, and I would like to introduce Jay Shofet. We can see you here, we can see you in the video, which has been with the SPNI for the last 5 years, serving as Director of Partnership and Development. Previously, he was the Director of the Green Environmental Fund in Israel, which supported the Israeli environmental movement, and the Shelley Fund, which supported local environmental initiatives here in Israel. So, Jay, the floor is yours. I'll stop the share, just a moment.
Hi, everybody see me? Thank you very much, Iris, and thank you very much, Dianne. We're already a little bit over our time, and but I still would love to. I had a few minutes to talk, but what I'd really like to do is ask each of you a question. If Dianne, you're still there, and Lawrence, you can still get Dianne back on screen. I'd like to take the prerogative I have here. We have had a few questions come in on all kinds of media, both before and during the talk, but I want to ask something general. Iris, can we get Dianne on, or are you?
I'm here.
Great. Dianne, I want to say, I want to ask you as a climate activist myself and in the climate community, just a few months ago, or was it a decade ago, when we were all inspired by Greta. We were having a Greta Thunberg moment, and I was personally inspired. I think the movement in Israel was galvanized in our organization. There was a lot of buzz about it, and are we reaching a moment, a tipping point in public awareness? Could this Swedish teenager have done what all those voices that the parliamentarian you quoted before we haven't responded to? And then Corona happened, and I don't know, nobody's thinking about that anymore, but is it a moment for us? We're learning to live smaller a little bit. It's not just that we see nature come back when we're not active, but is this a moment where we begin to think about life more sustainably as we exit from Corona?
Yes, absolutely it is. And you're right, some people are distracted, many people are distracted, but it's also true that many people have recognized the enormous opportunity that we have right now to choose how we rebuild. If we rebuild what we had before, if we cement ourselves into a brown future, we're throwing away our kids' last best choice. But the governments are putting out billions and trillions of dollars in rescue money. They get to set the terms for that. We shouldn't be and don't have to bail out big polluting industries of the past. We can and should be building the industries of the future, the restorative agriculture, the clean tech, the renewable energy, which is increasingly cheaper anyway. And so for people who are interested, thank you for asking that, because I was rushing. So one thing that everybody can do that really matters is speaking to your politicians right now. And I can't speak to what's happening in Israel, but in Canada, I can tell you right now, the federal government is struggling with exactly this question. How should they be spending those billions and billions of dollars? Should they be bailing out the old industries, or they should be building something new? And from what I hear, the federal cabinet is quite split. And so there's a tremendous opportunity. There is a huge political opportunity right now. And if you want some help to write in, I have a suggestion. So I helped two groups put together letters on the green recovery. One is by Clean 50, which is clean capitalism. What can the business community do? And the other is by the Climate Caucus, which is written by mayors and councillors across the country who are focused on climate issues. Both of them looking at the huge opportunities right now. So for example, for every dollar, would you like to have a quarter of a job in the oil industry, or would you like to have a whole job in renovating houses, jobs that will endure? So I've got both of those letters on my website, saxe.com, in the blog page, and you give you a link. And both organizations are asking everyone, please, if you agree with those sentiments, take the letter, endorse it, send it to your MP, send it to the Prime Minister, ask other people to endorse it. And what we're hearing from the cabinet ministers is that it really matters. They need to hear public voices, and they need to hear it from a variety of trusted voices. So if anyone has the ability to speak up and to get others to speak up, this is a moment when it really matters.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm glad I asked the question too. And I have one question for Iris. Since you already mentioned what we need to do is to petition our government. Iris, are you still with us?
Of course.
Can you get her on there? Iris, petition what government in Israel? It's been a year and a half now we haven't had a functioning one, and you yourself mentioned that it's in the best of times, it's not, climate change and the environment are not high on the agenda in Israel. Any thoughts about how, when and if a government ever becomes formed in Israel, will be able to get that issue on the agenda now, coming out of Corona?
Well, it's $1 million question. We learned few things about in this time, in this Corona crisis. We learned that governments, that international cooperation is possible. We need it for climate change as well. We saw that the public cooperates when they get frightened because of something. Now, the coronavirus is very immediate, and people stayed at home because they were frightened, because they obeyed. I don't know, we are really trying to think very hard how to convince people here in Israel and all over the world that the climate change is dangerous, not less than the coronavirus. And this is a very big challenge. Sometimes, I don't know, here in Israel, we are used to all kinds of catastrophes. And people say, okay, you say it's dangerous, it's not so dangerous, we are used to this and to other things. So I'm in change. I go outside and I see that the skies are blue and it's not so hot. So it's very difficult to convince. And nature protection in Israel is in a very, as you said, it's in a very, very low place in the agenda. Maybe it should come from the public, because politicians listen to the public.
From the youth.
From the youth. Maybe the change comes from them in the whole world and in Israel as well. Because it will not come from the politicians themselves in Israel. I'm very sad to say it, but I can't see how they will change. But if it will come grassroots from bottom up, this is our mission. This is our challenge.
Thank you. Thank you. Great talks from both of you. I really appreciate it, Dianne and Iris. Thank you so much. I have just a couple minutes now of your time. I want to say basically just two things. I want to, are we seeing me now? I am not.
We are seeing you, Jay.
Okay, great. So I just want to say that I want to sum up the vision that we have for Israel, and I think for all countries, for all developed and developing countries around the world. We in the Society for the Protection of Nature, we as people envision Israel much more perfect in many ways. But environmentally, in terms of the quality of our lives, we envision a country that is full of beautiful green nature spots to enjoy and to share it, to cherish and to protect. Nature spots not just out there that you have to drive to and you might camp in, away from the hustle and bustle, but right in the cities. Urban nature spots, if you've been to Jerusalem and haven't been to the Jerusalem Bird Observatory or Gazelle Valley Park, you're missing a couple of really world-class urban nature sites that show you how right in the center of dense cities, you can enjoy nature and kids can learn about nature and grow to appreciate nature. And that's the kind of Israel that we need to do. We need to be and we need to do. Build dense, sustainable, pleasant, multi-functioning, multi-use cities and protecting the open spaces outside them and within them. We'll be a country that works on sustainable development and green building practices, and all of this will be done with participation of the people, democracy and public participation and engagement. It's a crucial pillar of any of this sustainability vision. And that's what we're working to do. And to get there, we need resources. You heard from Iris and Alan a bit about about the loss of our income from everything that's been shut down lately. We're losing a lot of money on every week now, and we're not sure when those kind of activities are coming back in. We hope very much you'll support us. You can find a way to donate online at our website, natureisrael.org, or write to your Canadian friends, or those of you from America, to New York office. You can send checks. We have offices there. The last thing I want to do is thank our Canadian hosts for this and introduce Paul Kay in 1 second, who is going to be closing up for us, a board member of the CSP&I. Before that, I just want to especially thank Avi in the Canadian office, our director, and Alan Schiff. And I want to mention about Alan, the politicians, Iris mentioned, the politicians are not gonna change us. They're not going to be the ones leading the change. But long time ago, it seems, there was a politician, a vice president of America, Al Gore, who really was a voice crying in the wilderness about climate change. He was a leader on the topic, and one of the people he inspired was Alan. Alan's told me the story about how he took Al Gore's climate change training course. I don't know how long ago that was, Alan, but thank you very much for that and for you and your late wife's efforts and dedication to CSP&I in Israel. With no further ado, I'll just introduce, to close us off here, Professor Paul Kay, Professor Emeritus at the University of Waterloo, the School of, I had it on my head, the School of Environment, Resources and Sustainability. Paul is a professor of water resources and climatic variability. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. I want to thank all our speakers, Galit, Dianne, Iris, Jay, Alan at the beginning, I guess, too. And I want to thank everybody who's tuned in tonight to the webinar. From my background, I just want to make one point. The extraordinarily wet winter that Israel had this year and the rise of Kinneret to overflowing after many years of extremely low, dangerously low water levels should not fool us into thinking that somehow normal has returned. Dianne did a very good job of this, I hope, disabusing us of a concept of normal. So looking beyond this pandemic, I would hope that we do not try to return to some concept of a pre-existing normal, but recognize that we great need for defining new normals in so many ways. Earth abides, but it does need our help and our work to protect it. So your donations and your support of SBNI and CSBNI help us support the important work in Israel. And as Dianne has indicated, ways we can operate within Canada and elsewhere. So from Canada, again, thank you to everybody. And I wish you, I hope you're safe and you stay sane in all this lockdown. And I'll turn it back to Jay.
Thanks, Paul. I just want one more thank you to the disembodied voice behind us running this whole show, Lawrence Casimir, working out of his home in Modi'in from SBNI, and I neglected to mention Michael Meyer, another person working for CSBNI, Development Director there in Toronto. Oh, hello, Lawrence. It's late here in Israel. We're going to be getting to bed soon. Thank you again, Alan, Paul, and Dianne. Really, it was a very, very inspiring, sobering, learned a lot, and we hope we have future contact with you again. Galit, also, I meant to thank you as well. It's always a pleasure working with the foreign ministry officials of Israel around the world. You guys are doing incredible work, facing incredible challenges, perhaps no less than the climate change challenges. Anyway, thanks everybody from here in Tel Aviv, and good night, good evening, and stay safe.
Good night and good luck.